We're waiting for Judge. No, she's not in the committee. The Judge isn't on the committee, but she's going to come anyway, so we'll wait for her. What's that? Probably should. Before we begin, would everybody please silence your cell phones? Andy, when people come in, when they come to the door in the middle, would you remind them outside to please silence their phones before they come in? Thank you. And also for board members and for presenters, I've been told by our communications officials that it's difficult picking up the sound. We're going to probably have to look into it for them. So I ask you to please speak as loudly as you can right into the microphone. I've been told that they're not picking it up. So we're going to take a look at that, but obviously we're not going to get that fixed before 5 minutes from now. So please speak into the microphone as for presenters as well, so that we can get it into the tape. And with that, I believe, Director Irvine, we're probably ready.
Okay. Good morning.
Good morning.
I would like to call to order the January 15th, 2020 meeting of the Committee on Strategic Planning and Service Delivery. Would the Secretary please call the roll?
Yes, Reverend Miller will not be here today. Mr. Peterson? Here. Ms. Rosales? Here. Chairman Irvine?
Here.
We have a quorum with 3 of the 4 committee members present.
Thank you, Greg. Our next order of business is the review of an ordinance authorizing the implementation of an extension of Bus Route 157 Streeterville-Taylor as a one-year pilot. Mike Conway and Elsa Gutierrez.
Good morning. I'm Mike Connolly, your Chief Planning Officer. I'm joined today by Elsa Gutierrez, Vice President of Service Planning and Schedules here at CTA. Staff is recommending the extension of Bus Route 157 Streeterville-Taylor along Ogden Avenue west to the Pulaski Pink Line station as a one-year pilot. The Chicago Metropolitan Agency for Planning and the North Lawndale Community Coordinating Council produced a quality of life plan in 2019, a community study of the North Lawndale community area. Introducing bus service on Ogden Avenue west of California to support new development in the area was a key recommendation of this community neighborhood plan. This area has seen recent economic growth after several decades of disinvestment. The expansion of the medical district westward and the creation of a viable television studio enterprise along 16th Street have led this commercial activity. CTA staff did a feasibility assessment and found that there has been an increase in jobs and job activity along Ogden. These positive trends indicate that there could be renewed support for bus service along this segment of Ogden Avenue. This neighborhood and the specific Ogden corridor from California to Pulaski are identified for increased public investment under the Mayor's Invest Southwest initiative that is currently underway. The estimated additional cost for the one-year pilot extension is approximately $550,000 available in the operating budget. Upon board approval, the extension would be implemented with the spring 2020 bus schedule change on April 20th, 2020. Staff will elicit public comment during the course of the pilot and report the findings to the board before the end. I'll be glad to answer any questions that you have.
Thank you, Mike. Any questions for Mike or Elsa?
Mike, just in terms of, does this come about as a result of a study that was done by the community?
It comes about as a result of the requests from the community. And there were requests prior to the study, but I think the study helped to focus this community on what they really wanted to focus on. And of course, the study looks at everything, schools, streets, parkland, All of that is a part of the study, but there's a specific element on transportation, and a member of our staff, the CTA strategic planning staff, participated in and worked with the community groups all along as they went through to help define what the community really wanted from the city. Is what it boils down to. It became a very extensive wish list of items that the community would like to see.
I think you had mentioned that there's a larger business, not some population.
Yes. It is more business activity based. The population has somewhat stabilized and is not dropping as it had been, but it is still relatively low. But it's that business activity that seems to be a leading indicator of increased types of all types of activities in this area, and this is something that we feel very strongly that investment in public transportation is economic development at the very base.
Any other questions for Mike or Elsie? President Carter?
Mr. Chairman, I just wanted to also make the point that Alderman Scott, who has been a very strong proponent of this and met with both the chairman and I personally to advocate for this adjustment. So he certainly deserves a lot of credit for his input and his personal involvement in pursuing this adjustment to this service to that community. So kudos to him.
I also want to offer kudos, man. This is already a very useful bus route that I use somewhat regularly, and so I'm happy to see it reaching even more of the community. So, good work. I have to skip back. I skipped over the minutes. We have to defer the minutes. Apologize for all of you that are fans of us passing minutes, but we got to defer it for our next meeting. Our next order of business is a review of an ordinance authorizing the realignment of bus routes number 52, Kedzie, California, and 94, South California as a one-year pilot. Mike?
Again, Mike Connolly, your Chief Planning Officer, Elsa Gutierrez, the Vice President of Service Planning and Schedules. Staff is recommending the realignment of bus routes number 52, Kedzie, California, and the number 94, South California as a one-year pilot. Route 52 currently operates between Addison on the north and 63rd and Kedzie on the south, and Route 94 currently operates between Chicago and Troy on the north and 74th and Damon on the south. The proposed change would simplify the routing of service by having all the bus service on California become a unified California route, both north and south, and the Kedzie route would just operate on Kedzie. Under the proposed change, Route 94 would be extended north. The current California route, South California route, would be extended north to operate on California and along the current number 52 routing between Chicago Avenue and Addison to the north. And Route 52 would be curtailed at Chicago and Kedzie and just continue to operate to the south. Under the recommended realignment, both routes would continue to operate within their respective service spans and at their current levels of service. So no change to the amount of service being provided. It's just that the bus stop that you've been catching the 94 out of the 52 on may become a 94 bus stop instead. And besides simplification of the route network and more intuitive routing, this realignment has the benefit of creating a better connection to the CTA Green Line for near Northwest Side customers beginning in their journeys in the Humboldt Park or Logan Square communities. A more efficient and attractive bus connection to the Green Line for this market could provide a benefit by relieving crowding on the O'Hare branch of the Blue Line, while making better use of available rail capacity on the Green Line, especially during the AM and PM peak periods. The one-year pilot of this proposed realignment is expected to be cost neutral. We're just shifting service from one route to the other. There's no additional service being added. But upon board approval, the extension would be implemented with the spring pick, the 2020 bus schedule change, and would occur April 19th of 2020. Staff will update the board with results before the end of the pilot, and I'll be glad to answer any questions that you have on this route, proposed route change.
Any questions?
So, I asked this, but we're gonna be setting up locations in our that would be done, since I have these
It will be. This is an area of Spanish speakers throughout, and so we will be putting out the communications in both languages.
It's not so much a question for this, but I'm curious, Mike, are we looking at other parts of the city in terms of bus alignment, ridership? A study in the economics of ridership throughout the system?
Yes, as you know, a significant portion of our ridership comes from bus service, and as you're also aware, on the ridership side, we've had a significant loss in ridership on bus. That's resulted in a number of strategies that we're pursuing to really address the bus service. Some of it you heard from the city in terms of priority slow zones and really helping us speed up our bus service and increasing enforcement of dedicated bus lanes, something like that. The other part of it is a process that we're undertaking to do a study of our entire bus service and taking a holistic look at where we're operating, how we're operating, and whether we're meeting the needs of the communities that we serve. It's going to be a almost year-long process. It's going to involve a substantial amount of public participation in that process, with the expectation that we'll come back to the board with recommendations on how our bus service can be improved and aligned with our customer needs in a way that ultimately we believe will help improve ridership on our bus service along with the other things that we're pursuing.
Any other questions for Mike? All right, fantastic. Thank you. If there are no further questions, may I have leave to place this item on the omnibus for board approval? Thank you. Since there is no further business to come before this committee, may I have a motion to recommend board approval of the omnibus? Will the secretary please call the roll?
Yes, Mr. Peterson?
Yes.
Ms. Alvarez-Aliz?
Yes.
Chairman Irvine?
Yes.
That motion is approved with 3 yes votes.
Thank you. And finally, may I have a motion to adjourn? All in favor say aye. We are adjourned.
1 second. We're ready, Director. Good morning.
I would like to call to order the January 15, 2020 meeting of the Committee on Finance, Audit, and Budget. Will the Secretary call the roll?
Yes, Reverend Miller will not be here today. Mr. Irvine?
Here?
Ms. Alvarez-Aliz?
Here.
Mr. Peterson? Judge Chevrolet?
Here.
Director Jakes will not be here today either. Chairman Silva?
Here.
We have a quorum with 5 members of the committee present.
Our first order of business is the approval of the committee minutes of December 11, 2019. May I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second. Will the
Director
Secretary
Irvine?
call the roll?
I'm sorry. Director Irvine?
Yes.
Director Alvarez-Aliz?
Yes.
Director Peterson? Judge Chevrolet?
Yes.
Chairman Silva?
Yes.
That motion is approved with 5 yes votes.
Our next order of business is a review of the finance report. Presenter Jeremy Pine. Good morning, Jeremy.
Jeremy Fine, your Chief Financial Officer, and I'm here to walk through the November results. With regard to November revenues, we see farebox totals up almost $3 million at 2.9 for the month. Passes, due to the timing of the activation of passes that typically happen at the end of the month because of the late Thanksgiving period, we see those. You'll see those results coming in December. So we see a slight negative drag on passes of 1.1 million. That leaves us for a total for the month of November up $1.8 million. We see the reduced fare subsidy continue to be cut by 50%, so we're down 1.2 million on that line item, with non-fare box totals up 300,000, which leaves us for the month of November up almost $1 million at $900,000 for the month. That has a reciprocal effect on our average fare, and we see free rides slightly higher than the same period last year. On a year-to-date basis, we see fare box totals down about 9 million, offset partially by an uptick in passes of 1.5 million, which leaves us for year-to-date down about $7.5 million. Reduced fare subsidy, again, cut by half by the state. We're down $12.5 million on a year-to-date basis there, and up almost $4 million on non-fare box revenues, which leaves us about $16.5 million down to budget on a year-to-date basis. Those numbers, both on a monthly basis and on an annual basis, continue to be offset by expense reductions that we see on the various line items. Here for the month of November, for labor, we see an unfavorable balance. As you may recall, we had overtime regarding some weather and construction season, so we see a slight unfavorable balance there, but that is offset by positive variance on the material line, as well as fuel, power, and predominantly the other expense line, which allows us to have a positive variance for expenses for the month of November of almost $3 million. When you couple that with the positive variance that we saw on the revenue side, that leaves us for the month of November positive to the tune of about $3.8 million. That kind of has a dovetail effect for the year-to-date numbers. Again, we see favorability on each of the line items outlined here on a year-to-date basis. That leaves us positive on expenses, about $33.5 million for the year. When you offset that against the drag for revenues, we still are positive to the tune of about $17.2 million year-to-date. That helps us offset the drag that we continue to see on the public funding side of the house with regard to sales taxes, real estate transfer taxes, and PTF. But again, we feel confident that we're on the trajectory to continue to close the gap so that we end up 2019 flat to budget. With regard to the three commodities that we purchased, fuel, power, and natural gas, we're effectively locked in where we want to be for 2020. We will continue to look for selective purchasing opportunities for fuel and natural gas as those avail themselves. But again, we're fully locked in where we want to be for 2020.
Any questions?
It's still a little early to tell on the overall numbers, but with regard to ridership, yes, we did see some positive trends in December, primarily due to the fact that the weather was very good. So, we will see some positive variance on our fare box and pass totals for the month of December. Because of the warm weather, because of the passes particularly ticking over and being activated for 7-day and 30-day passes in the early part of December. So we will see some positive variance there. And again, are working with the various departments to control expenses. We'll see some positive variance on the expense lines as well. No, we continue to work with the state and the RTA with regard to the process to receive the PAYGO funding. So the state's still working through the details of the PAYGO funding and the mechanism to release the funds. We've been talking to the RTA about contingency plans if the state doesn't have a plan formalized in the relatively near future.
Any other questions? Thank you, Jeremy.
Thank you.
Our next next order of business is the review of an ordinance authorizing a co-promotional advertising trade agreement with Bank of America for the 2020 Bank of America Chamber Chapel. Jeremy.
Thank you. Again, I'm Jeremy Fine, your Chief Financial Officer. I'm joined by Stina Fish, who is the Manager for Business Development.
Good morning, I'm Stina Fish, Manager of Business Development. Today I present for your consideration an ordinance authorizing a co-promotional agreement with Bank of America for the 2020 Shamrock Shuffle. This year's Shamrock Shuffle will take place Sunday, March 22nd. Through this co-promotion, Bank of America will provide CTA with certain promotional consideration, including CTA travel information on the race website and an email blast to participants and volunteers, as well as space for the CTA Community Connection bus on site on race day. The total value of the package Bank of America is offering CTA is $31,683. In exchange, CTA will offer Bank of America up to $31,683 in unsold interior car card advertising on CTA bus and rail, which will be used by the bank to promote the Shamrock Shuffle. Bank of America has already purchased advertising on the system in the amount of $31,683. The agreement also includes an indemnification clause, which protects either party from misusing the other's intellectual property, logos, or proprietary marks. CTA has partnered with Bank of America or its predecessor to cross-promote CTA and the Shamrock Shuffle since 2004. I'm happy to answer any questions you have.
No, I was gonna say, I don't have any questions about this, but it really brought to my attention that we talked about how we can get CTA. I don't know if we've got enough time to get rid of the teaching about this, but we have huge turnouts in commercial. Employees get excited about the t-shirts and all that. I love the idea of this
Yeah, I agree, and I think it is a tremendous opportunity for our employees. And unfortunately, I came up with this idea very late in this process, so I'm not sure we'll be able to do a lot around the Shamrock Shuffle itself, other than some ad hoc work that may occur. But I have asked the team going forward, as we have these co-sponsorships, to look at ways in which we might be able to incorporate our employees as a partner in that. As a way to both promote CTA, but as you pointed out, really to promote causes that are the type of thing that CTA believes in, and obviously the personal health of our employees as well. And we will certainly follow up with not just 241 and 308, but all of our unions to encourage them to participate in these types of events.
And then you might take
Yes.
not just that this should be like it's health matters for all of us.
I agree, and I know that our HR department does sponsor and work closely with our employees around participating in events, and there are a number of events. As a matter of fact, I'll make sure that we get you some information to the board about the things that we do participate in, but I think there are clearly additional opportunities that we can pursue, and I certainly want to try to encourage as much participation as we can in events like this.
Any other questions? If there are no further questions, may I have leave to place this item in the omnibus for approval?
Second.
Thank you. Our next order of business is the review of an ordinance authorizing a first amendment to a sublease between Sterling Racine LLC and Fairpoint Development LLC for property located at 120 North Racine Avenue, Chicago, Illinois. Bill.
Good morning. Bill Mooney, your Chief Infrastructure Officer. Staff recommends approval of an ordinance authorizing an amendment to a sublease between Sterling Racine LLC and Farpoint Development LLC for property located at 120 North Racine Avenue. On August 12, 2015, the Transit Board approved a 10-year lease with Sterling Racine LLC for 84,879 square feet on the first and second floors of the CTA-owned building at 120 North Racine. On August 9, 2017, the Board approved a 2-year sublease between Sterling Racine LLC and Farpoint Development LLC. Sterling Racine has requested CTA's consent to amend the current sublease with Farpoint Development LLC to extend it on a month-by-month basis. Sterling Racine will continue to be responsible for all rent and expenses as set forth in the lease agreement, including its prorated share of the building operating expenses and all applicable taxes and utility fees. Sterling Racine is required to obtain CTA's consent prior to subleasing, which cannot be unreasonably withheld. I'd be glad to take any questions.
Any questions, please?
Yeah, so Sterling Racine has predominantly occupied almost the entire first and second floor. It's like 99.5% occupied at this point.
Any other questions? If there are no further questions, may I have you to place this item in the omnibus for approval?
So moved.
Our final order of business today is the review of 5 purchase and sales award recommendations. First, welcome. Good morning. Good morning. To you. First, let's see contracts numbers B1 through B3. Any questions?
Yeah, I've just got a question on the one. I understand why the increase funds because we got all these programs and materials. I'm just curious because I look back, I think these companies that told me providing this is not state-based, but how do they get to the centers? Trucks, is it all your trucks? Company by rail, how are they actually?
Good morning. Juan Pablo Prieto, Director of Diversity Programs. They are trucking it in. We have had challenges with trucking on these type of contracts, especially out of state, to try and get a local firm, DBE firm, to go out to, they're coming from the East Coast, right, and then truck it back. The costs can be prohibitive for a local firm to do that. And we have had challenges with these firms meeting goals just on trucking. And unfortunately, that's the only opportunity, subcontracting opportunity that's presented as part of this scope.
We unload the trucks with CTA personnel, and so it's brought into our storage facility and warehouse down at 63rd and Calumet, and then we have CTA personnel on site with cranes and large forklifts that unload it. There are occasions if we do a large enough order, we have direct access to a spur off the freight railroad, and we have actually brought some of this material in by freight previously too. And in those circumstances, we actually bring the carrier cars into the yard and unload the cars ourselves and push them back to the freight railroad.
Any other questions? So let's move to contract number G1. Any questions? Finally, move to contract number H1. Any questions?
Can you just speak a little bit of that to us to see what the contracts of the
H1.
Sure. So this contract is for,
Ron Lester, Chief of Safety and Security, and I'm joined with Frank Gressick, the General Manager of Occupational Safety. Frank.
This contract is to provide labor, materials, equipment, resources, and cleanup, handling, removal, and transport, and disposal of hazardous and non-hazardous waste generated at CTA facilities system-wide, whether the waste was generated from a planned, unplanned, or emergency event.
Yeah, the expert, again, this is the third contract we've seen.
In terms of DB participation, it's difficult to get DB participation on hazardous waste contracts because of the equipment and the certifications necessary to handle hazardous waste. So it really comes down to the equipment that they need to handle hazardous waste.
Mr. Chairman, just to add a little bit more substance to this, this is a contract that we use to deal with hazardous waste removal. As you can imagine, the system the size of CTA and all the facilities that we have, we generate hazardous waste over time, and we have to have specialized contracts to actually properly remove and dispose of that. In addition, this contract is intended to deal with any emergency situation that may occur where we need to have emergency resources brought to bear immediately to deal with a hazardous cleanup situation. While those are rare, they do occur, and we obviously have an obligation to respond immediately to that, and we use this contract to help us in that type of work.
No, it's a great point, and we're always working with purchasing and the user groups to look at scopes and contracts to see if we can create opportunities for DB participation or even set them aside through our small business program. A good example of that is B3, right? DBE1 is the prime on B3. So we got 100%, even though we set a 25% goal on the contract, we have 100% DB participation on that.
Good. Any other questions?
I guess just to elaborate on Chairman's point, I know regards to maybe how this
So purchasing puts out an
An 18-month buying plan, and we register at the city of Chicago, and we have it on our website as well. So we go 18 months out.
And besides that, diversity goes out and talks to our assist agencies about contracts in which we could not set a DB goal because there were no certified DBs in those areas. So we talked to, Chatham Business Association, HACIA, about how can they grow these businesses in these areas or encourage individuals to expand their businesses into those areas so that we can have certified DBEs in these areas. Yes, all our assist agencies, yes.
Any other questions?
I would make one other point. We also obviously work closely with our sister agencies around issues like this to also see if they're identifying potential resources that we can tap into. So this is not just a CTA effort. It really is a citywide effort. And there are a lot of activities going on, particularly right now, to try to find ways to coordinate better and to make sure we're sharing information about both what we have identified as opportunities for DBEs, but also where we think we have gaps in DBEs to support certain services, to see if there are ways that we can transition companies from one maybe similar type of service into the service that we're looking for. Yeah, I agree with everything that the board is raising around this regard, and I know that Juan Pablo in particular has been one of the key personnel working on this coordination and really working to identify these opportunities. So we're going to continue to work harder to see what we can create, separate and apart from what we already benefit from in terms of our DBE program.
Any other questions? If there are no further questions, may I have leave to place these 5 contracts on the omnibus for approval?
Second.
Since there is no further business to come
Chairman,
before-
the motion's been seconded, but now we need to take a vote on
May I
the,
have leave to place this item on the omnibus?
yeah, it's been moved, seconded. Now I'll take the roll call vote on it then, to get the contracts on the omnibus. Now I'm a little bit confused. We had leave and second to get the contracts onto the omnibus. Now we just need the motion to approve the omnibus that has everything on it. So why don't we ask for that motion to approve the omnibus? So moved and second. So now we're going to take a vote on recommending board approval of the omnibus. Director Irvine?
Yes.
Director Alvarez Rosales?
Yes.
Director Peterson? Judge Chevrolet?
Yes.
Chairman Silva?
Yes.
The motion to recommend board approval of the omnibus passes with 5 yes votes.
Okay, since there is no further business to come before this committee, may I have a motion to recommend board approval of the omnibus?
We just did that, sir. We just need a motion to adjourn now, sir.
Will the secretary call the board? We already did.
We're-
And
I
finally,
think
may I have a motion to adjourn?
Right.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
We're adjourned. Thank you. I think we're a few minutes before 10, so why don't we take about a 5-minute break? All right?
the energy of this whole thing. I'm just like dragging my butt. Oh man, it's super low energy, you know? But it's the whole nervous system. I know it's the sunlight, it's just like, I'm going to the yes.
I hear you. All right, got it. And I've got the coffee. All right. All right. Excellent. Love to it. Love to it, brother. Love to it. Feel like it's Vegas. You know, just sell it. All right. Excellent.
Yes. I know. I heard that. I got the message. That's actually.
Okay, would everybody please be seated? And if we could close the door. And we're about ready to begin. This is going to be really quick. It's going to be probably at least a half hour now. All right, everybody, please be seated, everybody. Please close the door, Andy. Please silence your cell phones. Okay, Chairman, I think we're ready.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Morning.
Happy New Year. I just realized this is our first board meeting of the year, so Happy New Year to everyone. I'd like to call to order the regular scheduled meeting of Chicago Transit Board for 2015, for January the 15th, 2020. Would the secretary call the roll?
Yes, Reverend Miller will not be here today. Director Irvine.
Here.
Director Alvaro Rosales. Judge Chevrolet. Here. Director Jace will not be here today. Director Silva. Chairman Peterson.
Here.
We have 5 members of the board here, and we have a quorum.
Thanks, Greg. The next order of business is public comment. Greg?
Yes, so we have no public comment speakers today. However, I have distributed correspondence that came in to me last night. I've already distributed to each of the board members to be passed out. So I've already done it, and that concludes public comment.
All right, thank you, Greg. The next order of business today is the approval of the December 11th, 2019 board minutes. The minutes were previously distributed. Any comments? Hearing none, I will now entertain a motion to approve the minutes of the regular board meeting of December 11th, 2019.
So moved.
Second.
And second it. Ms. Irvine,
Yes.
Ms. Alvarez-Rosales,
Yes.
Judge Chevrolet,
Yes.
Mr. Silva,
Yes.
Chairman Peterson.
Yes.
The minutes are approved with 5 yes votes.
Thanks, Greg. The next order of business is executive session. It is my understanding that there will be executive session today, Karen? Thank you. I'll now entertain a motion to recess into executive session upon recommendation from council.
Second?
And second, Ms. Irvine,
Yes.
Ms. Alvarez-Rosales,
Yes.
Judge Chevrolet,
Yes.
Mr. Silva,
Yes.
Chairman Peterson.
Yes.
The motion to recess into executive session passes with 5 yes votes. And for our audience, this is going to be at least a half an hour, I know that. Thank you.
we got audio there. Good.
Mic check 1.
Audio.
Mic check, 1, 2. Yep. Mic check, 2, 1, 2. Mic. Mic check. How's this one? So? What number is this? Number. Mic check. Number. Write that down. Check. Mic check. 1, 2, 3. Yeah. Mic check. 1, 2. 1, 2, 3. It's okay. Yeah. Mic check. 1, 2. So this one's better. This one's better. Okay. Mic check. 1, 2. Yeah. Mic check. 1, 2, 3. Okay. Check 1. Mic check. 1, 2. Mic check. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2.
Thank you for your patience. We're all back, Terry.
All right. I now entertain a motion to return.
Oh, Karen's not back yet.
Wait,
Sorry.
Where's our general counsel?
Sorry about that.
Esteemed general counsel.
Esteemed
So-
General Counsel, is how we call it.
Esteemed general counsel.
Esteemed.
She missed that. I will now entertain a motion to return to open session of the regular January 2020 Chicago Transit Board meeting.
So moved.
Second.
Second, Mr. Irvine?
Yes.
Ms. Alvarez Rosales? Judge Chevrolet? Mr. Silva?
Yes.
Chairman Peterson?
Yes.
That motion is approved with 5 yes votes.
Thanks, Greg. The next order of business is a report from the Committee on Strategic Planning and Service Delivery. Director Irvine.
Good morning. The Committee on Strategic Planning and Service Delivery met earlier this morning. The committee deferred its July 2019 minutes. The committee reviewed 2 ordinances: an ordinance authorizing the implementation of an extension of Bus Route 157 Streeterville-Taylor as a 1-year pilot, and an ordinance authorizing the realignment of bus routes number 52 Kedzie, California, and number 94 South California as a 1-year pilot. The committee approved both ordinances and placed each of them on the omnibus for approval and recommended board approval of the omnibus. That concludes my report, Chairman Peterson.
Thanks, Director Irvine. The next order of business is a report from the Committee on Finance, Audit, and Budget. Director Silva.
The Committee on Finance, Audit, and Budget met earlier this morning. The committee reviewed the finance report and approved the December 2019 committee minutes. The committee reviewed 2 ordinances: an ordinance authorizing a co-promotional advertising trade agreement with Bank of America for the 2020 Bank of America Chamber Shuffle, a review of an ordinance authorizing a first amendment to a sublease between Sterling Racine LLC and Fairpoint Development LLC for property located at 120 North Racine Avenue, Chicago, Illinois. The committee approved both ordinances and all 5 purchase and sales awards, placed all of them on the omnibus for approval, and recommended board approval of the omnibus. That concludes my report.
Thank you, Director Silva. May I now have a motion to approve the omnibus as stated by Director Irvine and Silva?
Second.
Mr. Irvine?
Yes.
Ms. Alvarez Rosales? Judge Chevrolet? Mr. Silva?
Yes.
Chairman Peterson?
Yes.
That motion is approved with 5 yes votes.
Thanks, Greg. The next order of business is the construction report. Bill?
Bill Mooney, your Chief Infrastructure Officer, and with me today is
Chris Bouchel, RPM Chief.
Juan Pablo Prieto, Director of Diversity Programs.
Okay, we'll begin where we usually do with our East Lake, Milwaukee, and Illinois substation upgrade. Since we last met, lineup number 1 was put online, which at this point completes the traction power equipment scope for this job, which is a significant milestone. The facility is entirely running on new equipment at this point. Here's the first picture showing that lineup, which is this is where we convert our ComEd power to make it to 600 volt DC that we ultimately broadcast to provide the power to our train. The remainder of the scope in this job is tied to the duct bank, which provides for the cable network from the substation itself to the physical right-of-way, our structure, and third rail, which is in the process of being installed right now. And here's a couple more pictures of that last piece of equipment there. as well as kind of site restoration. We have to finish the courtyard. I've shown you some pictures of that over the previous months, so we'll have to complete that as part of the duck bank package and some final tuck pointing and cleanliness and lighting upgrades in the facility now that we've got a little more space to work with.
Question, is this installed by our people or external?
So this is a contractor doing this work. We have, in certain circumstances where we've had one of these pieces go defective, we'll replace that with our maintenance personnel. As part of these packages, as we salvage some of this older equipment, we have a lot of old substations remaining on our system. We'll hold on to some of these pieces that are still robust as safety nets. So as if a piece fails at one of our older facilities, we can swap those out, and we've done that work before. This is done by an electrical contractor.
What's the life expectancy of the installation?
So this is heavy-duty electrical grade equipment for industry, and we should see a 40 to 50-year lifespan on this. We often run to the higher end of that. 30 is a pretty solid lifespan for this equipment.
Purchase it from the manufacturer, is it what, 5-year warranty, 10-year warranty, and inspections? How does that work?
So we usually get a 1-year warranty as part of the construction package on all parts, labor, and equipment. We have ability to go back after manufacturers through the construction contract itself if we do find issues with that equipment, even past that warranty. It's a latent claim. We take over, once it's substantially complete, maintenance of that equipment, and we maintain to OEM standards and CTA standards, which are a little more aggressive typically than the industry, in part because we do exercise this equipment for a much longer lifespan than is typical.
Is that pretty much the minimum 1-year standard that they don't offer extended warranties?
Most manufacturers won't on this type of equipment. And here's a last picture in the commissioning process of that piece of equipment. Our next project is our Your New Blue signal upgrade. The project remains on schedule and on budget. As we've kind of come through the end of the construction season, they've done a little bit more site work out there, but most of the focus has been on fabrication of signal houses for the installation this spring, the first of that equipment coming on site. That first picture shows you they're doing some validation of the circuits in the new Jefferson Park relay house, which is being fabricated by the designer right now. And this next picture shows you kind of the final end of season site remediation work where they're backfilling in some ballast around some excavations that had happened throughout the line cuts. This is being done out of the edge of the yard at Rosemont. In the upcoming months, we'll be bringing in that new signal equipment, starting to drop those relay houses and cutting over to the new system. So, our next project is our Lakeline and South Main Line track improvement program. Since we last met, we had our last 2 line cut weekends. One was on the Lake Street, where we did rails profile grinding. As I'm sure many of you remember, at the very beginning of this project, we did this on the South Main Line, so that same machine came back and did the Lake Street now. It helps smooth the head of the rail and reprofile it, extending its lifespan, as well as making a more comfortable ride for our customers. And we had a final weekend on the South Main Line doing the last bit of tie installation as well as major punch list work out there, which would be the conclusion of this project. JP?
Yeah, so on this project, we set a 22% DVE goal. The contractor committed to 23.44, and through the payments so far, they're exceeding that goal, that commitment, but we anticipate them to come in right at the commitment of 23.44.
Our next project is our ballasted track improvement project on the Brown Line. Since we last met, we had our last line cut weekend on this project at Kedzie Station, where they renewed this track within the station footprint. Here they are in tamping and lining that track. That's where we compact and set the alignment for that track and push all that stone and compact it around the ties themselves to create stability. This next picture shows the installation of the auxiliary negative rail that runs through the center of this that helps complete the power circuit. And here's the third rail going back in at that station as well. This will also conclude this project at this point.
And on this project, this was a work order through MidCon. We set a 20% goal on this. The contractor committed to 20%, and we anticipate them to hit 20% on the dot.
My next project is our electric bus en route charger stations, where the work has been primarily focused at Chicago Garage and Chicago Austin. At this point, the majority of the infrastructure work has been completed at those facilities. This first set of pictures shows you the installation of the ComEd equipment at Chicago Austin. ComEd will be providing service very similar to what our substations have in reliable, heavy industrial grade ComEd voltage, as well as some site remediation deals with the bioswale deals with runoff or rainwater on that surface. This project is currently tight to schedule. We've been working with the manufacturer on the heavy infrastructure work. As you'll see here, that heavy electrical grade equipment's in there and is being livened up currently. We've been working with the manufacturer on the technology component of this. So this is kind of the first in the nation installation of fast charging stations and the use of this technology. And so we've been doing a lot of study on their safety case and their preliminary hazard analysis and working through details to ensure that it's being installed in a responsible manner that protects our customers and our employees and ultimately our assets. And that study kind of on this newer technology is taking a little longer than we wanted to, but that technology is in production now and we should be seeing it coming on site shortly for the kind of completion of this aspect of the project. Our next project is our Grand Chicago Division Station renovation project, which continues on schedule and on budget. The work has moved to Chicago in the last month, where we've done topping slab work on one half of the platform there, similar to what I've shown you previously at Grand and Division. Here in this first picture, they're showing you the pouring of the new topping slab after the old topping slab has been removed. Here it is being prepped and set first and treated. This next picture shows you one of the main stairwells going down to the platform level where they're removing the old tile walls and adding a new tile fixture and new CMU with it. Here's some mezzanine work that was going on at Grand in recent. So as we've talked about this, there's a phasing of the mezzanines and the stairwells, and so this was a shift on the phase and shows you the new tile work being installed in the other half of Grand. And here's the installation of lighting that ultimately gets enclosed in the drop ceiling.
Most of the work that we're doing at this point is in two locations. We're in the bypass location installing foundations for that bypass. That is really the first major piece of work that gets installed. In addition to the foundation work on the bypass, we are also working to install two major interlockings on either side of the Lawrence to Bryn Mawr segment. Those major interlockings enable us to control trains and then build that bridge in a phased manner as per the contract. So we have started the installation of those two interlockings, at least at the Thorndale, one of the two. There are two interlockings, Thorndale and Montrose. So we've started in the area of Thorndale doing preparatory track and electrical work. In addition to that, the design continues at a brisk pace. So there are a number of designers on this project. As you remember, this is one of the projects that has both a DBE requirement for the contractor as well as the designer. So they're working closely with JP and his staff to meet those requirements, as well as to turn out substantial design packages that enable us to bid and award the work as per schedule. You can see in some of the photographs we have two major types of foundations for the red-purple bypass. The micropile, which we tend to install in areas that are smaller where we can't get the big caisson drilling equipment. We put in a series of micropiles and then put a cap on the top of them, which is roughly equivalent in strength to a caisson, but it enables us to do it in a smaller, more constricted area. As you can see from this photograph, it is very close. This one happens to be very close to the Belmont station. Subsequent foundations in this area were caissons. So you can see them in the installation process in the next slide. And then finally in the slide after that, the installation of the cap, which really ties the separate smaller micropiles together. Then, as I mentioned before, in the installation of the two interlockings in the Lawrence to Bryn Mawr segment, we are, in these first weekends, we're doing various types of preparatory electrical work. We have a substation in that area. We need to move around some of the duct banks and some of the cabling associated with that. In addition, one of the first pieces of work that we did was to align the tracks so that we could put that interlocking into it, because those interlockings come with sort of the specific geometry. And so we had to change the position of those existing tracks using equipment that Bill talked about earlier, campers. we use them generally for maintenance, but in this case to spread the tracks out a little bit and put the right kind of shape into them so we can drop the interlocking in the future. So you see that in the next slide here. The tamper is the one on the left. Again, similar to some of the equipment we generally use for maintenance, or in one of Bill's projects on the Ravenswood branch to get the track in good shape. But here we're really using it to move it so we can install a brand new interlocking. Next slide shows you some of the cabling. This is cabling generally that was installed associated with the Broadway substation. But we're moving some of it around as per our plan to accommodate these new interlockings. One of the things you'll see in coming reports is a big trench. Chairman, you'll be familiar with big trenches on the Red South. We saw several months of those as we put in the various cables. Well, up here we'll be doing a similar thing under the interlocking, at least in the area of Thorndale where we have ballasted track. Moving to the advanced contracts, demolition of the two contracts, one is closed, the other is in closeout. We're working with purchasing on that. And then in the advanced utility, we are tight to schedule and tight to budget, but in neither case will we see an impact to the larger design build contract. We are in the closing part of the heavy civil part of the utilities. So this is the part where we take things that are above ground on poles and generally have dug a duct bank in the alleys adjacent to our right-of-way, or in some cases installed new manholes in various public streets and right-of-way. We're getting to the end of that portion of the work. And in fact, if you see in the photographs, if we advance here, the slides, so we get to those pictures. So this ComEd duct bank at Argyle is now closed up. We've been working very closely with ComEd at this particular location, principally because there is an important Argyle Lunar New Year parade on Argyle Street. So this is now subsequently closed up, and ComEd is working on restoration of the street in preparation for the February 1 parade. Much of the work to complete now is really service cutovers. So if we've installed a new pole or we've installed a new service line up an existing pole, it's time to switch over from the older service to the new, which involves some customer communications with the various utilities and their customers. We're doing what we can to facilitate that and to understand when their trucks are parked in the alley like this, and working with the Alderman's office to make sure that folks that work, live, or have businesses in the area are aware of these impacts. Finally, as this work increases, you can hear it and see it from the slides, so too does our community outreach. So we've been spending a lot of time going out to various places. We have been working with adjacent construction projects. For example, the first meeting here, community outreach meeting in the 44th Ward, it has to do with coordinating a piece of work that the owner is doing at 3324 North Clark. And we have met with them to make sure that we understand what the boundaries of their work are and don't impact them. As well as we start to drill some of these foundations, we have miscellaneous street closures, so we're working with Alderman Tunney and meeting in advance with his constituents to make sure they understand when and where we're going to go, and we're dealing with their concerns in that matter. And then you saw the pictures of Thorndale. Well, that work comes with impacts to various streets adjacent to right-of-way as we mobilize in and out. Most of that work on those interlockings is weekend work for us. So we are coordinating as appropriate with the 48th Ward as well. So a lot of different meetings, and most of them are starting to relate directly to pieces of construction that are weeks ahead of the meetings themselves. So with that, I'll turn it over for Workforce and SBDB. Lots of good efforts on that front as well.
Thank you, Chris. To close out the year, as Chris mentioned, there's some prep track and electrical work happening. So to close out the year before that work started, we, along with the contractor, hosted a joint workforce and DBE event focused on track work and electrical work. So we had the subprimes that were awarded the contracts come out and talk to both DBE firms that were interested in performing as part of their commitment to DBE, and then also had the unions, Local 134, and Local 76 out to talk to individuals interested in careers in construction in both of those specific trades. We held the event at Truman College, right outside the Wilson Station. So it was a good turnout. As Chris mentioned, design packages are coming out regularly now. So Wash Floor is doing a great job at advertising these to the DB community as well as sending it to diversity. So we'll also send it to the DB community to make sure that interested firms know about these opportunities so they can get their bid packages in as they're starting to evaluate these packages.
So Chris, I just, first of all, let me just ask the other directors, do you have any questions for Bill, Juan, or Chris regarding the presentation? What's been, because this red purple model is such a big project, has there been any aha moment? You know, when you take it on, I know when Bill will ask you to, take this on, put a team together to focus on it. Has there been any moments, aha moments, where you're like, wow, this went better than I thought it would, or this right here, I'm glad we were nimble and had a team kind of focused on it because it helped us to, get on top. Have you had any of that? I'm sure you have, but
Well, I'll say one of the most important things that we've done on this project, it has been a struggle, frankly, though, the advanced utilities, is working with those utilities whose contractors don't directly work for us has from time to time been a challenge. But doing the utilities in advance and working with a smaller team that's sort of dedicated to keeping those as much ahead of the larger project as possible has been certainly an aha moment, and certainly something that would probably make sense to carry forward in other aspects of this work, and really kind of came out of early discussions that Dorval and I had, and I think Dorval's experience in particular with other large projects and their challenges. So, I think we've seen in Chicago that getting ahead of utilities and not having a huge contractor sitting around waiting for various lines to be moved or other things to happen makes a lot of sense and eliminates a big level of risk. So I'd say that's the big aha moment.
And in the community, this kind of disruption over a number of years, how has the community, I know we've had a few community meetings with Harry Osterman, I know Alderman Tunney has been all over this as well in terms of that. How have the community meetings gone in terms of the public understanding that, for a while we've got to be disruptive in the area, but at the end of the day we're going to have this state-of-the-art system?
We've certainly focused on what we're going to deliver and on providing as much transparency as possible. That continues to be a major effort, particularly as we're not talking about this in theory that's going to happen in a couple of years. In 2 years, we're starting to talk more incrementally about things that are happening right now.
Yeah.
And as you guys know from watching all of us, we work all the time, and I think that still comes as something of a surprise to the community, despite the fact we try our best to make sure they understand that. They would say, oh, well, you're not going to drill into the ground because it's frozen. Well, given the kinds of tools that we use, 2 or 3 feet of frozen ground is not a major issue. So we work all year round. So we continue to make sure people understand what this is going to deliver, what it means to the city, and try to just be as transparent as possible. That's always a major piece of work on a project like that.
Okay, well, thank you. Great report by everyone.
We're this technology. Europe's used fast charging stations for many years now. This version of the technology that's kind of coming to the U.S. Much slower than I think what we're seeing abroad. We'll be the first to use this actual technology itself. There's been other iterations of it in samples in other cities, but this actual technology that's being installed for this project, we will be the first ones. It's in back house use for some of the providers and them, but we'll be the first public agency using that piece.
So with that, because it's new and it's electrical and it's such a concentrated area for electricity, are there additional training that we have to do for our employees, or additional precautions in the area that we're using?
So one of the really important aspects of this design-build project was the preliminary hazard analysis that we actually put upon the contractor to develop and identify all the potential hazards that exist out there in that world and come up with resolutions in that. And we consider that an organic document that's kind of living and breathing. So as we continue to do work on this project and submittals come in and we look at design things get added onto that hazard log as we vet through these concepts. As part of this installation, we've treated it very much alike our substations. As you've seen in ELMI and other projects we've talked about, which we have a very journeyman workforce that deals with this high voltage electrical industry to begin with. We felt like that was the best spot for us to situate it because we have a very veteran workforce. We have lots of protocols and standard operating procedures and safety protocols that are built around that maintenance program. When it gets turned over from the contractor, there's typically familiarization training that goes to all those employees that are maintaining and responsible for those facilities. And so they get a series of days of training specifically to the equipment that's installed in that facility and all the familiarization with that, as well as we get a series of standard training manuals that we can then train the rest of the workforce. We build the training programs requirements in the contract that allows us to cycle through all the employees that could potentially be in that facility based on the number of days and availability of that. Separate from that, the buses, which are tied to this procurement as they come online, there'll be a series of training modules. I know Workforce and Development has actually been down to the warehouse facility for the vendor and looking at the training stations they have there and been working on the development of those training modules as we do a whole implementation rollout. No different than any other bus we roll in our fleet. There's a series of familiarization trainings that go out to those operators because each bus is a little unique and different.
You know, I would echo everything that Bill said, and I think what we're recognizing is a couple of things. One, in terms of our workforce, there's going to be a broader need to address the workforce development and the training that's going to be required to maintain these vehicles and the traditional diesel vehicles that we've had, and we are engaged in a lot of conversation around that and really working to start to identifying the skills and the places in which we're going to have to develop that type of training. And that's more for the mechanical side of it. Bill's it's accurate about the charging stations themselves. We are treating them almost like substations because in most cases that's exactly what they are. And we're fortunate enough because we have an electric rail system to have a lot of familiarity with the maintenance of that type of equipment. And our staff will be properly trained on how to maintain that. The bus operators will never be in that part, just like my rail operators are never in a substation on the rail system. And then our operators, the operating an electric bus is very different than operating a diesel bus, and a lot of the efficiency that you gain the use of an electric bus come from the way the operator actually operates the vehicle. And so there's certainly a training component that our training development team are putting together that will educate the operators on how to operate that kind of a bus and the things that are very different from what you might see in a diesel bus that are intended to both maximize the efficiency of the bus and also provide some level of comfort to the operators in terms of how that bus performs relative to what they may be used to. If any of you own an electric car, you know that it performs very differently than a gasoline car. And so, there are similarities on the bus side, although a electric bus is not going to have insane mode that's going to allow you to go 0 to 60 in 5 seconds. But there's certainly acceleration and other issues that are unique to electric vehicles that we're going to make sure our operators understand as we start to incorporate these buses into our fleet. It's also part of what's a bigger effort that we're engaged in right now as relates to the transformation of the entire system to electric buses. And one of the things that we're very focused on is developing a work plan and a roadmap that's going to lay out how we need to do this, how we develop our workforce to support it, and ultimately how we actually will operate and maintain it as we begin this transition to an all-electric bus fleet that obviously will take place over a number of years.
Thank you. The next agenda item is new business. Greg, is there any new business?
No, sir.
Okay, with no further business to come before the board, may I have a motion to adjourn? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
We're adjourned. Thank you.